Hi everyone, this is Hana, and welcome back to my island. If you look at globally famous Korean movies and dramas, you will see most of them heavily critique capitalism and class. Works like Parasite, No Other Choice, and Squid Game. Of course, there are plenty of other shows dealing with completely different topics too. South Korea is a country that really wants wealth, but at the same time deeply hates it. Koreans stay up all night, glued to housing prices and stock chart, relentlessly focused on making money. But at the same time, we get incredibly angry against the corporate greed and cold market logic. We feel this more fiercely than anywhere else in the world. In a society where money is the only thing that protects your dignity, the humiliation of being left behind is incredibly deep. This boiling, mixed up energy is what makes Korean content so captivating to the world. The US is, of course, the heart of modern capitalism. Hollywood loves showing those wide shots of Wall Street skyscrapers. It coldly shows greedy bankers and the mess inside giant companies. To Western creators, the flaws of capitalism seem like a broken part in a machine. They think it's something you can fix through honest talks and better rules. It is a very cool and logical approach. But the Korean camera feels completely different. It shows the damp, musty smell of the semi basement in Parasite, where toilet water backs up when it rains. I know this feeling well because I lived in a semi basement like that as a kid. It shows the desperate look of a father pushed to the edge in No Other Choice. I deeply understand the pain my dad went through during the 1997 IMF financial crisis. And it shows the pure chaos in Squid Game, where people turn on their own neighbors just to survive. To Koreans, the flaws of capitalism aren't just the dry numbers on a screen. They hit real families and cause fierce fight for survivor at the very bottom. So here I have a question. Why do Korean stories capture the toxic side of capitalism in such a raw, intense, and deeply personal way? To answer this question, we have to look at how Korean society worked before the 1997 IMF financial crisis. Back then, Korea was very different from a standard Western free market. We had a strong myth of a job for life. Once you joined the company, you stayed there until you retired. The company acted like a big family, taking care of your housing loans and your children's tuition. People fully trusted that a massive companies would never go under. People stayed optimistic even under harsh working conditions during the military rule because the economy was growing by 7 to 10% every year. People were treated like parts in a machine, but they accepted it with an absolute belief. I will gladly sacrifice today for a better tomorrow. It was a uniquely Korean growth story. The state, companies, and individuals were all tied together in one shared destiny. Sociologist Chang Kyung-suk calls this compressed modernity, and it explains this strange gap perfectly. Western societies took hundreds of years of struggles and compromises to build modern capitalism. But Korea adapted so fast in just 30 to 40 years right out of the ruins of war. As a result, on the other side, Korea looks incredibly modern. But deep down, our mindset is still stuck in old family traditions. Our city skylines ended up looking exactly like New York or any other big cities, but the mindset of people competing inside them still belong to the farming society of centuries ago. We got rich incredibly fast. However, learning to treat each other as equal didn't happen fast enough. When the 1997 IMF financial crisis hit, over 3.5 million citizens gathered 227 tons of gold to help the country. This globally unique movement showed our deep collective desire to live well together. Then, what came after this passionate effort was a complete betrayal. To get the IMF bailout, Korea had to adopt American style free market rules. A brutal change began. Big corporations covered their massive debts by firing thousands of regular workers. People had trust their companies and the state like family. Suddenly, being pushed into a cold war of every man for himself became a real terror carved into the Korean mind. This unfair recovery wiped away the failure of greedy corporations using the sweat and tears of hardworking citizens. It completely broke Korea's deep sense of solidarity. The massive fence we firmly believed would protect us suddenly turned into a deadly weapon, stabbing us in the back. This trauma left a deep scar on a whole generation. American movies critiquing capitalism usually focus on the system flaws. But in Korean thrillers or survivor games, the greatest fear is not a serial killer. The real horror happens when the community we trusted, like the state, the company, or our neighbors, abandoned us to save themselves. Deep down, we still have the warm instinct to look out for others and share a meal. But the real world system forces a cruel game of musical chairs. We can only survive by stepping on someone else. This deep mental clash creates extreme tension. If Western capitalism is a dry trade of numbers, Korean capitalism is a fierce fight for survival right at the dinner table. It doesn't treat system violence as some abstract theory. Instead, it turns it into an intimate tragedy where closest neighbors turn on each other. This is exactly where the explosive power of Korean content comes from. The creators leading these stories are the directors who grew up in the 1980s and 90s. They lived through military dictatorships and intense political protest, fighting for social change. Directors like Bong Joon-ho, Park Chan-wook, and Hwang Dong-hyuk lived through the most turbulent times in modern Korean history. They sharpened their eyes to see through the abuse of power and system flaws. The spirit of resistance built while facing tear gas on the street shifted in the 2000s. They started picking apart corporate greed and endless competition. The political slogans from the public squares moved onto the screen. They became a sharp knife cutting into the heart of capitalism. Their greatest weapon is blending heavy social messages smoothly into popular genres like thrillers, horror, and black comedy. Instead of explaining class struggles through dry documentaries, they wrap them in thrilling survivor games. They push regular people into extreme survivor situations to show the hidden truth of the system. While Western intellectuals politely discuss inequality in lecture halls, Korean directors show flooded basements and life or death tug of war games, keeping the audience on the edge of their seats. Turning a massive social tragedy into highly gripping entertainment catches the audience off guard. It makes them feel the harsh reality instantly. Ironically, the Korean film industry itself runs on extreme commercialism and fierce competition. Giant distributors control everything from productions to theaters. If a movie fails to grab the audience immediately, it gets dropped or sent straight to streaming in just a few days. The final piece of this intense ecosystem is the Korean audience. They are known as the pickiest and most sensitive viewers in the world. Hollywood blockbusters often release in Korea first as a testing ground. The saying, if it succeeds in Korea, it succeeds globally, is an unwritten rule in the film world. Before legendary directors like Bong Joon-ho, Park Chan-wook, and Hwang Dong-hyuk became famous globally, their art was first tested by Korean audiences. Armed with a deep cultural sensitivity, Korean viewers don't settle for shallow entertainment. They react quickly to stories, they mock real-world flaws and capitalist pressure. To survive this critical audience, creators must pack their stories with extreme detail and depth. To convince investors, Korean creators take the exhaustions and despair shared by people worldwide and turn them into highly captivating entertainment. It is a fascinating irony. Content that attacks capitalism creates the highest profit inside a strictly capitalist system. This drives the dynamic imagination of Korean creators. These anti-capitalist stories are made by people who fully understand the extreme rules of survival. They became a strange, beautiful flower blooming out of a system we hate. The works born from this intense background are the mega hit that struck the world. Director Bong Joon-ho's Parasite captures the harshness of capitalism using sensory elements like smell and rain. It visually shows the wealth gap through vertical spaces like steep stairs and semi-basements. It perfectly shows the cruel bottom layer where poor people must fight each other in a secret basement just to keep their spot in the wealthy house. At the end, the son, Ki-woo, vows to make money and buy that mansion instead of changing the system. Through this sad, empty promise, the movie shows how deeply capitalist desires take over the minds of regular people. Director Hwang Dong-hyuk's Squid Game turns innocent childhood games into deadly survivor fights. It metaphorically shows the shifting values and harsh survival rules of modern Korea. It exposes the emptiness of a winner-takes-all world by crushing moments of teamwork with system tricks and human selfishness. The game hosts constantly talk about equality and fairness. This fake fairness directly attacks the hypocrisy of modern society and the idea that anyone can succeed if they just work hard. In the show, the real world outside the game is depicted as worse hell than the killing inside. This highlights the extreme cruelty of modern financial struggles. Recently, director Park Chan-wook's movie No Other Choice shifted the focus. Instead of fight between rich and poor, it shows a desperate survivor fight among people in the exact same class. It is based on Donald E. Westlake's novel The X, set in 1990s America. Director Bong tried to make this movie in Hollywood for over 10 years. He thought it would work best in the US, the heart of capitalism, since it critiques the capitalist system. But due to the budget issues, he moved the setting to Korea. This turned out to be an excellent choice. The director even said he regretted not making it as a Korean film much earlier. In the US, corporate layoffs are seen as routine. But in Korea, getting fired shatters the lifelong trust between a work and a company. This deep sense of betrayal drives the story emotionally. In the American novel, the main character plans murder purely as a cold, personal survivor tragedy. But the Korean main character, Man-soo, gets fired after 25 years of loyalty. He eliminates his job competitors out of a desperate need to feed his family. Actor Lee Byung-hun asks the director Park Chan-wook, would someone really commit murder just because they got fired? Director Park answered, showing convincingly that people can act differently expands our understanding of human nature. In Korea, economic failure directly leads to the collapse of the family. This intense pressure turns the dry original story into a deep, emotional tragedy. Man-soo carries out terrible serial murders just like an office worker doing his daily job. This is the peak of Korean-style dark comedy. He uses the most inhumane methods for the warmest goal, protecting his family. This irony perfectly shows how Korean society observed and twisted capitalist pressure. Beyond globally famous hits, there are many independent films and series that dig deep into the hidden scars of Korean society. They are tragic yet beautiful records of psychological collapse. They prove how the pressure of modern capitalism has changed its face over time, eating away at Korean lives. The first work of my recommendations is director Lee Chang-dong's 1999 movie Peppermint Candy. It shows how innocence gets destroyed by rapid economic growth. It is the root of modern Korean storytelling, revealing how compressed growth and violent history crush a person. Director Lee Chang-dong traces the life of the main character, Joon-ho, backward from his absolute ruin during the 1997 financial crisis. It shows the tragedy of a Korean man who is both a boss and a victim. He was used as a tool for military brutality and economic growth. Actor Seo Kyung-gu portrays this pain perfectly. The movie follows how state-led violence mixes with the daily survivor fights, slowly destroying his sense of right and wrong. In the famous opening scene, he stands on the train tracks and screams, "I want to go back. 나 다시 돌아갈래." This remains one of the most powerful scenes in Korean film history. Young-ho's despair perfectly mirrors the mood of late 1990s Korea, waking up from growth illusions to face a cold reality. The second work of my recommendations is the 2015 drama Songgot, The Fiercer. It deals with the temporary workers fighting against unfair layoffs at a giant foreign retail supermarket, Carrefour. It shows how a company claims Western logic turns into a harsh monster when mixed with Korea's strict top-down culture. An executive orders unfair firings and coldly says, "Because they can do that here." This famous line brings the concept of the banality of evil straight into the workplace, showing how regular people can do terrible things just because they are following orders. It reveals the system flaws are not just created by a few greedy villains. They are completed by ordinary neighbors unquestioningly doing their jobs, using company orders as an excuse. When a giant corporation uses logical rules to cut off the livelihood of vulnerable workers, they hold hands and build barricades. This strong teamwork shows the most basic human defense against the cold capitalism. The third work is the 2022 movie Next Sohee. Director Jung Joo-ri's realistic story is a cruel, live-action version of the burnout society. Instead of physical forced labor, it tracks the quiet death of high school students on job training. She completely exhausts herself under the pressure of targets and efficiency while being forced to smile and stay positive. A call center's daily statistics slowly push a younger over the edge. It shows how modern systems crush individuals without shedding a single drop of blood. The film splits into two parts. It connects the tragic death of high schooler Sohee with the perspective of the detective played by Bae-duna investigating the case. The movie avoids forced emotional tears. Instead, it quietly observes how schools and authorities simply look away, leaving a deep, heavy impact. It is a masterpiece pointing out a broken social system where there are no distinct villains, only victims suffering from immense pressure. The fourth work is the 2018 movie Burning. We move past the era of street protests into a low-growth era where the social ladder is completely broken. Director Lee Chang-dong's camera enters a much more philosophical stage. Inside a smoothly running world with no clear villains, it contrasts to Jong-soo, a poor young man with no future, and Ben, a mysterious ultra-rich man. It shows what true absurdity looks like. It captures the quiet, elegant violence of wealth, staying silently vague against a young man's desperate searching for meaning. It shows that anger without a target, not even knowing what to be mad at, is the greatest struggle for young people today. Actor Yuan's empty eyes perfectly embody lost youth. The beautiful scenes where Chun Jong-seo dances against the sunset sky combines with the mysterious sounds, pulling the audience into a deep artistic experience. It is a masterpiece showing how the invisible glass ceiling of capitalism amplifies personal helplessness. In the end, the secret of Korean content's global appeal seems clear. It comes from fiercely clashing the cold, dry, imported logic of capitalism with the hot, emotional heart of Korean community culture. Western stories often treat system flaws as simple numbers, but Korean stories place a sharp microscope on the real pain of regular people crushed under those ruthless gears, showing exactly how family love breaks apart. Korean creators do not stop at pointing out economic flaws. They aren't afraid to show the ugly truth about our society. And they aren't ashamed to expose the raw, unfiltered side of Korean life. They unfold a deep philosophical fight on screen. They ask how human dignity is damaged and defended in front of the giant monster of money. Right in the middle of material desires, they paradoxically layer intense compassion for others and deep sacrifices, making the story much deeper. Even on the exhausted faces of characters crushed by money, they capture a desperate human love trying to hold someone's hand until the very end. Translating a universal system's tragedy into raw, physical pain and fierce survivor struggles. Isn't this dynamic energy the real reason global audiences cross language and cultural barriers to connect with the Korean stories? Pushed into the most inhumane survival roles, Korean society used the human emotions as fuel to create an incredibly powerful art form. The passionate thirst for wealth, combined with a deep hatred for the violence that system creates. This extreme philosophy of love and hate seems to be the engine supporting Korean society and its content. The most painful irony is that the Korean creative world is now facing another test from giant capital. Korean content grew massive with global praise, but it is now at risk of just making content for massive global streaming platforms. We welcome global capital because it offers huge investments and opportunities. But at the same time, we are angry and afraid of losing our intellectual property and creative control. This situation exactly repeats Korea's unique love and hate dilemma toward the system. Will we stay controlled by capital logic, simply producing critique stories tailored for global tastes? Or will we grab creative control and flip the table with a strong self-reliance? Right now, Korean society is having a very active discussion to find a better way forward. Fighting fiercely on the edge to prove our identity, while at risk of being swallowed by giant corporate predators. Even this reality looks exactly like a plot from a Korean drama. The power to turn a harsh capitalist hell into something visually beautiful and emotionally explosive, and the dynamic energy of creators struggling to flip the table just to survive again. This record of intense struggles shaped inside a boiling melting pot of fierce love and deep hatred for capitalism is the ultimate reason Korean art never stops breathing and living. So, what do you think? If you know a movie or a series that critiques capitalism brilliantly, please recommend it in the comments. It doesn't have to be from Korea. We can talk and learn from each other while we are talking about all different perspectives, different cultures. All right, this has been Hana's Island. You're safe here now. If you like my video, please support me with a like and subscribe. Let's meet here again. Until then, please stay cozy on the island that perfectly fits your own latitude. Take care. Bye.